Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of STARKADE Radio. It has been a week full of wreckage, but our star still shines real bright. My name is James White. I am your host. I am the Chief Creative Officer of STARKADE. And with me today as co-host and a special guest is going to be John Hill. He's the lead narrative writer for STARKADE, and we are going to be talking about all things story and narrative and the mechanics of writing for the Web3 space, which brings with it all sorts of challenges, I'm sure. And we're going to unearth all of those things as we put John under the hot lights, that poor guy. So STARKADE Radio, this is the place to get all of your news, updates, stories, and the play-by-play action as we build out the STARKADE universe. If you want to check out what we have done and what we are going to be doing, be sure to pop over to STARKADE.com and check out all the links over there. Check out, be sure to connect your wallet, check out what fighters you have or may have in the future, and check out our training ground, and check out the star map and the story section, because that's going to be relevant to what we're talking about today. If you want to participate in our community, pop over to our Discord. That's where everybody is listening and talking trash about me right now. You can pop in at discord.gg/STARKADE. One of the big topics of discussion earlier today was what color underwear James wears. But that secret is going to be remain safely with me, fellas. So as I said, today's special guest is going to be John Hill, and we're going to be talking about all things story and the mechanics of writing for Web3, and we're going to get to that in a couple of minutes. And next week's episode is going to be a real fun one. We're going to be talking about Midjourney. Artificial intelligence art. Yes, we're going to be talking about Midjourney because this topic was kind of, the catalyst comes from the Discord. Mainly Void Seeker and Pinsky. Throwing around a lot of Midjourney artwork last week, and I've been secretly and not so secretly experimenting with the AI engine over the past week, and I have a lot to say about it. I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of demystifications, if you will, and how all of this relates to STARKADE. So next week is going to be a Midjourney-centric episode. I don't know who I'm going to have as a guest next week. It might be just me babbling, because, I like to consider myself the voice of STARKADE, even though, Jerica Snow might be the face of the STARKADE Legion, but I consider myself the voice. But don't tell Jerica, because I'm sure she will have me disappeared overnight real quick. So once again, everybody's still filing in. Thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. This is episode 3 of STARKADE Radio. A little bit of an update before we jump into some of the metrics of this episode. Recruiter profiles obviously is on the tip of my tongue and has been for the last 2 episodes. So what's happening right now with recruiter profiles, the structure is basically done, if I'm not mistaken. And the dev team is going through a very, very important task of expediting the information that we can pull from the blockchain. And that means when you're pulling information from the blockchain, it's not as quick as the normal internet is in delivering all that information and nice images and all the stuff that we need to run STARKADE.com efficiently. So the development team is looking at ways, or isn't looking at ways, they are building ways of expediting that process. So all of the things that we release in the future will be delivered to your screen in a swift manner. And that means the dashboard, which will be the recruiter profiles, we're talking training ground, the fighter directory, everything that we have released for STARKADE will now have an expedited delivery system, so everything runs and you're not sitting waiting for your lovely fighters to load on your screen as long as you have been, which is very important. And this is the dev team is looking at this not only in the delivery of the recruiter profiles and the things I listed, but also future-proofing all the stuff that we're going to be releasing. And it's a very important task that has to be done and will affect everything that we do at STARKADE. So big round of applause for the dev team. For tackling this, I'm sure, complicated task of trying to get everything running smoothly. So once everything is done and they're happy with how things are being delivered to your screens, recruiter profiles will be ready to roll. And, I've been seeing what Naomi and the team has been building. And I can tell you, if you've not popped over to STARKADE.com anyway, please do that and look at what the team has built, because, I might be a bit biased when it comes to this stuff, but I do maintain that we have one of the best websites in the Web3 space. And I know that's highfalutin talk, but it's also true. So be sure to pop over to STARKADE.com and check out everything that the dev team has made and the UI team, i.e. Naomi, our CEO, has put together, because it's a beautiful piece of work and it's only going to get better when Recruiter Profiles goes live, because I've been talking about it. Recruiter Profiles comes with its own link that you can then send so everybody can see your STARKADE wares, and you can show off and intimidate the hell out of all of your opponents coming up real soon. Badges are included, and it's going to be excellent to show everything, all the badges of honor that you've accumulated through your time interacting with STARKADE. So be sure to check out STARKADE.com and everything that we've been doing up until now. So personally, what the heck have I been doing this week? Well, I mentioned last week I'm working on developing the Legion Arena, the hero illustration. The first thing that you see when you log on to the forthcoming Legion Arena game, that's what I've been doing, which is no easy task, and it's taken a lot of sketching. And as of yesterday, I think I cracked the code of the style I want and the energy that I want on that screen. So I cannot wait to show anybody. But the problem is I'm not allowed yet because I haven't gotten signed off from the CEO. Also, the damn thing isn't done yet. But I am pretty sure I can get signed off on some of my sketches and process leading up to what I'm developing right now. So be sure to pop over to the Discord and pay attention to that sneak peek channel, because I might be able to chuck a couple of sneaky peekies in there to show people what I've been working on straight out of the sketchbook, which is going to be very, very fun. And I cannot wait to show everybody what I've been doing. Very exciting. Lucas, of course, is still working on Legion Arena testing. He is our lead gaming architect or engineer. Can't remember his exact title, but that's what he's been doing. He's been hard at work getting Legion Arena working the way he wants, with all of his lovely math and all that good stuff. And Naomi, of course, has been hard at Recruiter Profiles and a lot of admin, as CEOs have to do to keep things running smooth. So all that stuff. And our comms team, Robert, Jack, and DC, have been working on a big marketing plan alongside some of the other members of our team. So you know what? I don't think I need to tell what John has been working on, because we're going to be talking about that this whole episode. We're talking narrative and world build. So before we get to that, though, a couple of community notes that I wanted to run through. Big ups, big shouts to the Broadside crew, who is minting right now. Vector Meldrew and Matt Mason appeared on last episode and gave us the rundown on Broadside, which I was stoked to hear and stoked to have grabbed 3 of my own Broadsiders. So if you haven't checked out Broadside, be sure to pop over to their Twitter. It's Broadside NFT, and pop over to their website. They have, I'm pretty sure if you pop over to if you pop over to OpenSea right now, Broadside is still featured right on the front page. It's easy to spot. And Mar1, our big community involvement from Mar1, is also minting the Adventures of Hazel and Atwood right now. So if you want to check that out, go to 2woodies.com and check out the lovely banner project that Mar1 has been doing. Big ups to Tommy TNT. Tommy just recently got his 50 fighter badge in the discount, which is insane. You know, I'm rocking a 24 or something like that, so Tommy's putting me to shame. But he recently got that 50th fighter that earned him his 50 fighter badge. So big congrats to Tommy TNT. That is a huge accomplishment, and big thanks to everybody from the STARKADE community for your continued support, Tommy. Rock and roll, and I'm scared to death to meet you in the arena. I tell you that, because 50 fighters, good grief. Getting them all trained up, you're an intimidating beast, Tommy. So big congrats. Big congrats for that. And Midjourney Experiments. Just want to give a big shout out to Pinsky and Void and anybody else who's been throwing Midjourney AI artwork STARKADE centric into the STARKADE Discord, because that has been really cool to see that you guys are giving that thing prompts to try to make it look like it comes from the STARKADE universe. I love what you're seeing, and we have been listening to you. And I'll have a little bit more about next week's episode at the end of the show. But speaking of this show, let's get into the meat and potatoes of all of this, right? We have John Hill, JPJ Hill on Twitter, if you want to give him a follow, writer at STARKADE. And John has been responsible for lore that has been wrapped around this year from STARKADE. It's no easy, and we started working with John over a year ago, I guess. What it will be, and John has created and lore surrounding everything that we've done. So, John, big ups, man. Thank you so much.
Hey, did I completely lose you there?
Oh, there you are. Okay.
yeah. You just started bubbling away, just as I was sitting there listening to you do all the talking, and you just introduced me and you cursed the entire Twitter space.
Breaks technology around. Again?
Uh-huh.
Your lead narrative writer on STARKADE, so we're going to be talking all things story today. So I guess just before we get into some of the topics, some of the awesome topics we're going to be running through, how about, and we did this last time, we did this a couple of times, just can you give everybody, all the listeners, a little bit of a recap on kind of the world of STARKADE and essentially any little stories and tidbits you want to tell us to back up the things that we're going to be discussing today?
Sure. Well, I mean, there are lots of different ways to jump into the STARKADE world. Probably the easiest way is to do this from the perspective of you. As you join the STARKADE world, you turn up here as a recruiter. So you're part of a giant corporate fighting universe called the Legion Arena. So coincidentally speaking, as we're approaching like the World Cup imminently now, it's kind of imagine an event that is bigger than the World Cup, bigger than the Olympics, absolutely huge sporting event beamed live into the homes of millions constantly. That's Legion Arena. So Legion Arena is this absolutely colossal entertainment giant where you've got all sorts of fighters from all over this world who meet up, they fight, they unleash strange chaos powers on each other. And it's all super crazy, and it's all extremely primetime box office stuff. As a recruiter, you'll have to grab these fighters, you'll pick up your superb talent, train it, equip it, and send it out to battle to fight for glory. So in itself, that's exciting enough. You've got this giant world that has this sort of extremely dominant entertainment of battling and fighting. But this is a universe with a difference because every generation, the best fighters from around the population are summoned by some mysterious, ethereal beings who are known as the Magna Prime. Now, the chosen few that are selected, they get to battle in this other arena. This is the second arena that defines the STARKADE universe. This is called the STARKADE Arena. The winner of this giant battle, they're all summoned into this giant orbiting arena. They fight under the watchful eye of the Magna Prime, and the winner gets the opportunity to make an ultimate wish that can change the world in strange, crazy, and disastrous ways. So you can imagine getting a sort of prize like that changes absolutely everything. It can make the world completely different. It can bring in a great era of equality and hope and joy, or it can completely screw things up for everybody. So you're part of this world. You're part of a world where you're recruiting all of these fighters. You're recruiting possibly the next champion of Legion Arena who can make you a lot of money and, well, can add to their fortune and fame as well. But you're also vying for this opportunity to be summoned to this giant arena up and floating around the planet, and potentially you can change everything. So in the past, of course, you've had people who have used this for good. You've also had people that have used it for evil, which is where the reign of the Dark Tyrant Voltigrim comes in. Back in the day, this fighter dominated everyone and used her victories in the STARKADE Arena to maintain an iron grip on the world, and it kind of sucked for everyone there. So they were pretty happy when she was randomly chucked into a portal at some point, and everyone's kind of been, you know, pretty chilled and okay since then. But there's always that thing hanging over the top of them where they're like, wow, this terrible thing is too terrible just to go away. She's coming back, and God knows what's going to happen when she does. So as you navigate this world of Legion Arena, you're going to see all of these characters in the arena, these Megastar characters, super fighters, from Flash of Lightning to Cold-Blooded Joe, Scrap Metal, Kentaro Cage. And these fighters don't just exist in the Legion Arena, they're popped up around the world as everything begins to change. And people who have been following the STARKADE universe over the last few months, they've seen some of these changes. The when we went on the journey of the Lost Fighters back in April and May, we saw the emergence of these fighters that have been, well, experimented on, genetically engineered to manifest powers outside of the Legion arena, which shakes things up. And I doubt that the Legion arena, happy to be dominant as they are, they're not going to like the competition. So we're going to see what's going to happen in the world where everyone can potentially manifest these powers and everything goes nuts. So we're going to be getting a few interesting changes. We're going to be seeing how these megastars make their way in the world, how their fighters, both yours and other people's, rise up the leaderboard, challenge for fame and fortune. And we're going to see, potentially, how this entire world changes.
No easy task.
Uh-huh.
He's halfway, John. Well, that's of course, with everybody listening here, I kind of experience your storytelling in the same way they do. I'm a fan, and it's all new to me. And Naomi and I love it when you deliver new stories and new episodes, quote unquote, if you will. But speaking of that, the Web3 space is a very different space to try to write story around, because it's not linear like a comic book. It's not a movie. It doesn't have like a kind of a start point and an end point and that sort of thing. So you have sort of the main story, which is what you just outlined, but you also have sort of the, you and I were talking earlier, and I call them side quests, quote unquote, that are stories that are wrapped around the releases that we do, like Training Ground, like the recruiter profiles isn't one, but like Shipment One, the Warehouse, and that sort of thing. So what from a writing standpoint, what are some of the challenges that you feel when you're trying to write story around releases that the team is doing? Because obviously you want to involve in as many sort of like, or not as many, but you want to involve the characters, the megastars, some of their backstory, introduce a few new characters, and try to expand on the world within these almost episodic little stories. The Warehouse Shipment One was a great example of that. What challenges do you have with trying to incorporate these sort of quote side quests into like the main lore of STARKADE?
Well, I mean, the main thing with STARKADE is that I think a lot of stories start off with a focal protagonist character. Whether you're looking at something like, say, for example, The Lord of the Rings will have a number of side characters, but it's essentially like the journey of Frodo. Harry Potter might be the journey of Harry Potter through this particular arc. In STARKADE, we don't really have a protagonist as such. I mean, even from the fascinating chat that we were having with the Broadside NFT guys last week, they were talking about having a main character, even though that main character switches and changes depending on the mechanics, which sound fascinating. But what we were trying to do here is we're eventually telling the story of a world. And what makes that interesting is that we can start telling stories of individual characters and how they live within a world which is the way it is. The STARKADE world is, with the way that the Magna Prime can offer this ultimate wish, which can change the world. You're essentially a citizen of a world which is changing radically in the background at random times. So you can go out and you can go and buy some like flaming hot Cheetos from the shop or something like this during the STARKADE tournament, and you come back and suddenly everyone has like a completely different house or a dog head, or there's a dark Eon has just appeared, and you're just like, oh well, this is all changed. So it's a question of how people in the world sometimes react to living in this world, and that's been fascinating for me to think about. It gives me an opportunity to think about what's happening to all of these different people, from the super megastars who have these amazing powers or these amazing abilities and strengths, to the Legion arena fighters who are existing within this big super corporate fighting universe, to just somebody like fans of the Discord will remember in Shipment 1, we introduced these characters, Meg and Earl. And Meg is really just a delivery driver. And she and her truck Earl are just existing in this world. And that's in some ways just as fascinating as the stories of the Megastars, like how regular people are just getting on in this world, which must be extremely, well, it's a bit of a thing for the mind, isn't it? Like living in a world where things can change radically in a second. That's got to be something to navigate. In answer to your question, really, in terms of the STARKADE universe, like you say, there are lots of different facets to it, from what we do with the training ground that came out in the summer, to the work that we're doing with the upcoming Legion Arena, to the upcoming work that we're doing with the shipments when the warehouse first came out. And the way that we see it is that STARKADE's story and STARKADE's narrative is not just bolted onto a number of Web3 and Web2 features that we've created. We have to think of these things as mechanics by which you get to know the characters in the world as well. Because, say, for example, if we come out with a story for Spikester in, say, January, that's not going to be the first time that you're going to hear about Spikester and who Spikester is and what she's like and what it's like to be with her. Because a lot of people will have spent a lot of time with her already, because they might be trained with her. And it takes a number of weeks to train with Spikester, and Spikester is essentially sending you messages most days. That's when you're going to get a real sense of their personality, what they're like and what they do and what they're like to be around. So it was very important to us every single time we created a feature or a piece of the framework of the STARKADE universe that narrative was so heavily embedded in it that it was an opportunity to get to know the characters in the same way that the story has been created.
Excellent, man. Well, as I said, I'm always excited and baffled every time you send me any story, because it's like you said, story isn't just bolted onto the releases that we put out. It's everything that you're writing is extremely thoughtful, and and very aware of the world that the unique world that you've built for STARKADE. Now, a little bit of my history with this, and history of working with you, John, for everybody here. I'm very much when it comes to writing, I am not a writer at all. And what I presented to John when we first started to work together was basically like these little singular paragraph descriptions of what the characters were. So if you bought like Street Fighter 2 and you open up the instruction booklet and it gave you like one paragraph describing what Blanca is, that's what I presented to John. And John is the one that took those and then fleshed out the characters to actually be interesting characters and have choices they can make and challenges they have to deal with, all that kind of stuff. So now, and in my characters and in my descriptions, I have influences, of course, old school Image comics, old WWF wrestling, video game characters. All of these different things kind of feed into my artwork. And this is kind of like a little side question, I suppose, John, but in terms of like the process of your writing, I know that you jumped in and you started looking at a lot of things and a lot of research that you were doing before even putting pen to paper on STARKADE. What sort of things did you do kind of in the warm up period before tackling some writing for STARKADE?
Well, the first thing that I don't know if I've actually mentioned this before publicly, but the first thing that we did is we had to establish some sort of framework of where the characters would go, what their boundaries were, personality-wise. Now, for example, I think Dan calculated this over the summer, that to create a bit of variety with training ground messages and such like, I think we had to create something like 1,400 prompts, responses that various characters would say in response from training ground. And it was very important that when we did this, we had to make sure that they were kind of on point with who the characters were. And they also had to have a sense of that you were going on a journey with the character in terms of you were training them with us for a certain amount of time. Now, I felt it would be a bit jarring if you were having a conversation with the character and they were like, you started off and they were initially like cold and hostile to you, then they warmed to you, and then they kind of reverted back, for example, into a characteristic as if they didn't even know you anymore. So we had to kind of get that arc going with the training ground messages about like, well, they're all progressive as well. So They change based on their familiarity with you, based on how well you're doing, based on how close to the end you are in claiming all of these traits, claiming your taunts and your combos and stuff like this. But also, we created, I was doing a bit of work on the psychology of character. And what I decided to do is to create a large character matrix, which exists on a Google Drive document somewhere deep in the catacombs of our STARKADE filing system. And I refer to this when I'm creating dialogue or creating the actions of character to give a sense of what they might do, what they would do. It's based on this idea of, there's a giant Google sheet here in which I'm plotting their character description based on elements such as, their agreeableness, whether they're like altruistic, compliant, whether they're modest, their neuroticism, whether they have whether they're self-conscious, impulsive, and vulnerable, their conscientiousness, if they're like achievement striving, if they're self-disciplined, whether they're open to change, whether they have they like it routine or they crave new experience, and their relationship to other people, whether they have a strong faith in humanity or whether they're hugely exploitative. And every single character has a color-coded scale based on how they mark in all those character descriptions. And for me, coming back to that, it helps me to reassess, would this character really do that? Would this character really react in this way to something that someone's done or something that someone said? Like, say, for example, if you do a really good move with Spikester, how would they react? Would they be encouraging? Would they be cynical? Would they be dismissive? It's an interesting question, because Spikester might be interested in, grabbing extra people for her gang, but would she do that through encouragement and making you feel like, oh, you're super special, I'll follow you over a cliff? Or would she do this by completely destroying your confidence and self-esteem so you had no choice? So that's one of the things I did at the start. Just develop this large character matrix that I could keep coming back to. One of the other things that I ended up doing was, as I say, plotting out exactly what we needed from characters in the world. Now, James himself, not so much me, but James himself, he's grown up very strongly within the WW world, the world where you've got these larger-than-life characters that appear in the ring. And I wanted to explore that as a sort of underlying part of the STARKADE universe. So there is a map plotted out, again, deep within the catacombs of our STARKADE filing system, which each of the characters has been designed to potentially have alliances and enmities with other characters within the universe. Fatal flaws, wishes, dreams, character elements, which allow them to come up against or link up with expected and unexpected allies and enemies within the STARKADE world. And that will help us to build things like, for example, even the possibility that certain STARKADE characters can turn heel or can become faces through the evolution of the STARKADE world. And I wanted them to be changeable, I wanted them to be surprising, I wanted them to be interesting, and also wanted to have that opportunity to go, hey, we can have a super team here for a second or two and make it a very sort of dynamic and interesting, there's a social dynamic, but just how these people bounce off each other and really create new story and interesting storylines.
See, and all of that reason is why I'm not a writer, because like I said earlier, just providing those singular paragraphs and then seeing you run with them and add all of this this relevance, this dimension to all the characters has been awesome. And that comes in various forms too, because when you and I first had the our first kind of kickoff meeting, and I just ran through, like 30 characters in 2 days or something. It was incredible to have those conversations, because you were full of ideas, like for how every character is going to develop and whatever. But even unintentional characters is what makes me laugh all the time. So and to zero in on shipment 1 in our Surge character. Now Surge is a little sort of floating obsolete computer character, a little yellow guy that I developed basically to be a little voice for when somebody goes to the warehouse to buy some items and power-ups to get some crates, right? So, and I just thought, oh, this will be a character that can help you, like, oh, we're processing your order. Yay, you got your order, that kind of thing. So I designed this little character and posted him in our Slack and showed him to the team. And you were going to be working on the story for shipment 1 anyway, or you were already working on it or something like that. And before I knew it, you had like a backstory and a trajectory built for Surge and stuff that I never even considered. And all of a sudden, this damn little obsolete computer has a voice and has challenges and everything. And and me and Naomi had a good laugh when all that stuff came in because it was something that we never ever considered. Can you? So just based on everything that you just talked about, could you do it like a little bit? You can go as deep as you want here, but do a little bit of a dive on the Surge character and how he kind of formed in your mind, just based on the design that I sent over to you, and you can get as far into the character and where he's going, but who he is and how that developed.
Sure. So, I mean, Surge is a very good example of how we like to build characters, incidental characters that might be completely throwaway out into parts of the world. Now, Surge originally started off as a Clippy, basically. For those of you that are not old, Clippy was this helper character that would appear in word processing programs and say, I see you are trying to open a document, can I help you with this? And it was just going to be a helper that would allow people to navigate through a certain process. Now, hopefully people will have already jumped into Warehouse when it was open for 48 hours quite recently, but you'll see the work that people like Patrick and Naomi on our team do to make the experience and the process as clear and frictionless as possible. So you should be able to get into the warehouse, buy crates, get to the stage where you can share what's going on, and get out and enjoy all your wonderful power-ups and items and other crazy stuff that we've stashed in there. But we felt that it needed some sort of connector, some sort of guidance where someone would say, hey, welcome to Warehouse, this sort of stuff is happening. Which is where we sort of said we need this sort of Clippy character also to provide not a human presence, definitely not a human presence, but a presence that was there that could say, oh, I'm not just staring at a screen full of objects. This person can say, come in, do this, do this. We could have just kind of left it a bit like that. We could have had the classic MMORPG salesman character, like not particularly saying or doing anything, just stands there and I would like to buy some potions, please. But what we wanted to do was wanted to make it slightly more interesting, because any character that you flesh out within the STARKADE world gives you the opportunity to bury foreshadowing and Easter eggs and to bounce them back and to provide a little bit more color and nuance to the world. So it's always our starting point. When we do that, STARKADE, our team, has a crack world build team, which exists within the team. It's a small group of us. It's James, it's our game architect, Lucas, and myself. We'll sit down and we'll talk about what you think this character or this place or this world element should be. We brainstormed a lot of it. I think there was definitely an early interest towards making this character robotic. So we decided we needed this character to be an interesting character. And the first thing that I thought about it was, well, why not make this character a kind of reluctant curator of the warehouse? This warehouse is just open, whereas this character came up. And Surge is essentially a character that was originally built. Surge was originally built as a giant ultimate killing machine that would appear in the Legion arena. He would take on fighters, he would be trained in lots of different forms of fighting and destruction. But because Legion Arena is a very entertainment-y and box office-y driven world, there's a lot of and fans of many modern broadcasters will be aware of this. There's a lot of focus groups and ratings and statistics woven into it. And Surge didn't test well in the Legion arena. For whatever reason, even though we all know robots are great, Surge didn't really turn too many heads in the Legion arena. So they kind of, instead of decommissioning him because they spent a lot of money, and they just ported him. They ported him into this wireless printer shell. And in future episodes of the shipment, we'll get a little bit more into the importance of wireless printers in the STARKADE universe. But he's now sitting there as an enormous dynamic killing machine who is basically running front of house in a warehouse. He's none too pleased about all this. And quite frankly, he's going to use the only weapon that he has left, which is his murderously frustrating control of the levers of bureaucracy, which, as people who have read the current Shipment 1 will know, well, Surge has already used those levers of bureaucracy to keep Meg delivering shipments long before she wanted to be quitting. So we kind of went through that process of setting up Surge as a character. And as we did this, we're working out what Surge might look like, how Surge might be animated as he's going through warehouse, like what gestures we're animating into Surge is based on the matrix of what sort of character he is, what he might like to do. And it also comes down to design as well. When we have conversations, we open to the wider team, and we're like, hey, we're thinking of doing this character. Does it sound horrendously like anyone else that you know? Either from games or books or comics or cartoons or whatever, and we'll sense check it so that we're not completely and utterly inadvertently throwing ourselves straight into someone else's character building or world building, and we're creating the most unique characters possible. Now, Surge has a long way to go. You've met the first iteration. You've met Surge as in now. Surge will change and grow, and he'll have a role to play later on. But it gives us an opportunity to reintroduce these characters and reuse them and make them valuable parts of the world, rather than a number of throwaway, flat characters, NPC characters, which don't really have any value to the universe. We try to do that with everything that we do. As you say, because it gives us an opportunity to plant Easter eggs, to plant foreshadowing, and to make the world feel more 3D, more deep, and more immersive.
Well, John, I know that you have your work cut out for you. Looping back to what you said about making sure the character doesn't sound horrendously like another existing character. And I know you have your work cut out for you when dealing with someone like me, because all of my crap is referencing something. And I can never pull the wool over your eyes when it comes to that stuff, because I'll do like, oh, this character is, and then explain them in a paragraph, and then you'll go, yeah, that's Shredder from the Ninja Turtles. Oh, okay, well, how about this? And then you'll go, yeah, that's the Ultimate Warrior. So you call me on it all the time, which is very funny. And yeah, you have your work cut out for you in that regard. But this, and one little tidbit, and then I got a question here from one of the people in our Discords. It's really funny when you're in the process of developing characters, because sometimes I'll make a change to a character or an edit just to like flesh out what the character might look like, or make the design a little bit more interesting or whatever. And Surge originally wasn't a quote unquote printer. He was just a floating computer. And I just added a little bit of the paper sticking out of his head to make it look like a little bit of hair or something that might be up there. And you latched onto that, and suddenly he was a floating printer. And then the printer idea mooched into the UI design, and Naomi had little like printer designed receipts. After you purchase a crate, you get your little print off of the receipt from Surge. And it's incredible to see that kind of stuff happening, and how quick you were to latch onto that thing and then chuck it into the character build. So very fun to see that, and I promise you I won't do it too often, because I'm sure with somebody like you that wants to incorporate everything, I could use that power for ill will, but I promise not to. So one of the questions from one of our Discord users, a big supporter of our project, Void Seeker, also resident troublemaker, he sent us a bunch of good questions, but this one in particular, I think, jives really well with what we're talking about. Have you ever had anything fun that didn't make the final cut, quote unquote? And before we get into that, I'd like to say that I have loads of stuff that didn't make the final cut in terms of Starcade designs and characters and things, because a lot of my characters go all the way back to 1987 and are based on wrestlers that I was watching in the WWF at the time. And a lot of the stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor or got massively changed was problematic stuff. When you're a kid in the 1980s and you're watching wrestling, you draw a lot of shirtless white dudes, and we wanted our Starcade universe to be as inclusive as possible. So that's a lot of the stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor from my end. I would have loved to just redesign all my characters, but none of that made any sense. And it had to be something different. So that's just a little tidbit from me. But did you come up with any ideas that might not have made the final cut based on your own editing?
Well, I mean, so far I'm just leaving a lot of things open. The interesting thing about being in control of the narrative and having lots of different threads sticking out there is if I've been told no, I can just leave a tiny little Easter egg hanging in the corner of a story innocuously that nobody notices, and that just gives me an in to reintroduce it again. There are a couple of characters who may have been rejected, or we may still be in the development stage with, that were introduced in a subtle and non-specific way near the end of the Lost Fighters arc, which gives me the opportunity to explore them again. There's also, and I won't go too close into this, there is also a part of the Waylands that I'm currently developing that I have to keep rethinking about how to do it, because technically Starcade is a property that we hope will be interesting for people of all ages to a certain extent. You look at inspirational really sort of great and engaging cartoons of the past, like Avatar, like Gravity Falls and stuff, that can explore all these amazing arcs and wonderful imagination, beautiful humor, occasionally dark humor, but still retains that kind of really all ages can enjoy it mystique. We're trying to replicate something of that with Starcade. And there's one element of the Waylands which I'm trying to develop in such a way that they can still maintain that, but it's pretty dark. So I'll leave that for now, because obviously I'm going to try and build that in my own special way. But I think one bit that really didn't go in, there was an initial character when I very first started developing the Starcade universe called Aya. The Starcade universe was introduced through this character who essentially was part of a group of people who existed in Tezuka, and she and her sister had grown up together. Her sister had led a revolution against the police of the area, and because that was an embarrassing thing, even though that caused societal change, it was embarrassing for the powers that be. So actually, her younger sister Aya was invited to Legion Arena instead, and it was going to be a story of how this person really contended with the fact that she idolized her sister. I think probably most of Tezuka did as well. That sense that I want to achieve and I want to do my best, but I'm always finding myself at second best and not feeling like I measure up to my sibling. It's something that maybe a lot of us have experienced in the past. But I thought that was an interesting start to the story. But I think this is where the collective element of Starcade really benefits us. That we can have people like, say, for example, James and Naomi and Lucas and Jack and people like that who can tap you on the shoulder and go, well, this is an interesting story, but does it help us to introduce the world to people who want to get involved with it? Or are you starting on a tiny little thread that just confuses people early? And doing something like this, which is a very complex, multifaceted project, I'm learning to be a little less obscure when I start telling stories. Like, you don't start telling the story of a world by disappearing into a small alleyway and telling the tale of a tiny pub that three people in the world have been on and is completely inconsequential. You have to kind of put the main threads together early so that people can understand it. And then when you're Star Wars, you can start talking about cantinas and stuff like this. But it's helped me to evolve with the help of these lovely people, helped me to evolve how I build worlds and how I tell stories.
Yeah, that's just based on some of my research, like mostly to do with comic books. It's really cool. We talked about earlier, or you mentioned earlier, about sort of Easter eggs and how things are connected through a lot of the writings, and you'll leave things open in order to pick them up again. And I think that's I'm sure that's a tactic used by a lot of comic book writers, but I think it was Alan Moore that does a lot of that stuff, and it does lead to loose ends, quote unquote, but leaving those things open to pick back up is a great way of future-proofing your process, right? And it's sort of, I mean, that's my sketchbook basically. Like, I have a lot of fighters and a lot of Megastars that I have yet to sort of fully realize, but I know that those ideas are there for me to kind of pick up when the time comes. So regarding those Easter eggs and stuff, and this is kind of like a two-part question. Is there any, and this might be too much, John. Sorry if I'm going to be asking you to reveal secrets or anything. But is there any loose ends or any Easter eggs or anything that you're looking forward to picking up in the future?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are a couple of, there's so much to do. There's so many different bits of the STARKADE world that we haven't really touched yet. We're in the middle of the kind of the Legion Eon. So we're establishing the world, we're establishing all these different bits. So there are still actually main character stories that we haven't told yet that I'm really excited about. Breaking that up into like a couple of parts, I think in terms of the stories that we've already done that I'm interested in coming back to, I'm really interested in revisiting the story of Alder. And for those of you that weren't familiar in the Lost Fighters story, Kentaro and your character, the Seeker, end up meeting Kentaro's mentor, and Kentaro's mentor has in his possession these library books which are infested with what we call Libricites, which are these little gloopy creatures like nanobots that exist in the ink, which can seep into your body and fill you with the conviction of a one statement, which is either a secret or a lie. So you're absolutely dominated by this statement, which you believe intensely, but it's either something that no one knows or something that's just complete crap. And I'm interested in using that. That was kind of something that I think was cooked up on a dark evening sometime in May. I'm interested in revising that and seeing how these little creatures can mess with people's heads. I'm also interested in getting back with the Calamities. Like, the Calamities existed towards the end of the Legion Arena arc, and they're these very cool chaos tentacled beings who presumably used to be Legion fighters, who have now got to contend with being just extremely strange and out there, but also how they exist as a collective. There are 15 of them. How they work together, how they work against each other, and what role they might play in the universe. There are a couple of characters that I'm very excited to introduce you to. I know that Esme has become a bit of an in-house favorite in STARKADE. Esme is essentially, as you'll know from if you read the Meet the Megastars profiles that we have over in Medium, on our STARKADE Medium, so check out them. They have a group primer for some of the characters that you'll meet. But Esme is essentially a techno witch, and the techno witch's job is essentially to act as fixers and therapists for people who have been kind of screwed over by the tumult of living in a world with the Magna Prime, where something changes and somebody's niece goes missing, or somebody suddenly wakes up finding that they're extremely poor and don't live where they used to, and their entire village is gone. And maybe they go to these techno witches and they'll give them a salve, or they'll solve minor problems, or they'll get revenge on people that you want, or maybe they'll just help you forget it all. And Esme has got to the stage where, for whatever reason, this isn't enough for her. So she breaks a great creed of the techno witches and disappears into the portals between time and space, and goes on, well, maybe a sort of multiverse-y quest to address some of the greater problems that the Magna Prime have caused. That, of course, messing around in time, as anyone who's watched Back to the Future or Quantum Leap will know, it's fraught with complications. And is she doing more harm than good? What's she creating? What's she destroying by doing all of this? Can she keep her thread together? So these are all like really fascinating, fun questions that I'm really looking forward to exploring through these characters in this Eon of the Next.
Yeah, that's so great, man. I'm really glad that you brought up the Calamities, because I've had many conversations with Naomi about the Calamities, and leading up to the reveal of the Calamities, I think the Dismal Pug was like your first sort of. The Dismal Pug isn't a character in our universe per se. It's a creature within our character. I think that's an accurate description of the pug. But when the Calamities came about, I knew straight away, like, I need to draw those Calamities. And that was, I think, the week that you came up with them, or the week that the story was released. When I was doing my Friday night drawing session, the Calamities was what I designed when I was sitting at the cafe having an adult beverage. And so I kind of see the Calamities as our first, like you and I, our first real collaboration, because it was an idea that you came up with that I kind of put a visual to. Which is very unique, which is a very unique situation for me to be in, because normally I'm just drawing the things that dump out of my head. So that was a really amazing brief to kind of see where it could go visually, which is really fun. We have about 5 minutes left, John. I got a little bit of an outro to do as well, but just you were talking about some of your favorite characters and some of your favorite things that you want to revisit, and I have my own group of favorite characters, and one of which, of course, and my favorites go all the way back to 1987, and Flash of Lightning, that we've mentioned earlier, is one of my favorites. He always has been, because he's kind of a jerk, but he's awesome. He's really good at what he does, but he's also, kind of as I said, a jerk. And again, stop me if you don't want to talk about this, or it's something that's going to be upcoming. But it's another question from Damn Void Seeker. Our loyal supporter in the STARKADE Discord, and he asked if we could talk about Grandpa Howl and maybe the future of lore expansions. Now, I wanted to zero in on Howl because I know this isn't a fully fleshed out character. It might have been just a conversation or two between you and I, but Howl is the grandfather of Flash of Lightning, which is interesting to me because that's now family lineage of one of my favorite characters. So for the people in the Discord, they would have seen me draw Howl about 2 weeks ago, and we have no real backstory. All we know is that he's a grandpa. You want to talk about Howl a little bit? Just what you want to reveal about the character right now, because I know there's going to be more plans for him in the future. But what do you say, man?
Well, Howl pops out of a conversation that James and I had walking down the River Tyne near Newcastle. Well, actually, pretty much in Newcastle. We were walking down there having a conversation about how the Legion Arena had evolved. And lurking within, and this is telling tales out of school a little bit here, but lurking within what we're calling our STARKADE internal wiki, we have a repository of character details, of incidental objects and places and things like this, and we're building up an internal wiki, which gives us an opportunity to create a consistent perspective on the universe. Within this internal wiki, there is a chronology of the STARKADE universe from the equivalent of their Big Bang before the Magna Prime and such like this, all the way to beyond the present day into when all sorts of crazy stuff goes down deep in the future months of our STARKADE world. And part of that was what happened before the Legion Arena became a massive thing. Now, if you look at our story page at STARKADE, our prologue will tell us a little bit about why Legion Arena was formed. When Voltagrim was chucked into the portal, they decided, no, we're never going to be helpless again. What we need to do is we need to set up this giant fighting force that will be there to protect us should anyone that big and bad come back again. And those were the earliest origins of Legion Arena. Now it's obviously, your super ultra Olympics World Cup wrapped into one sort of corporate fighting explosion. But in between, we wanted to explore what was going on. And a little bit of a spoiler here. In the days before, the Legion Arena was the one place to go. And you had the technology to beam things in from a single spot all the way around the world with super wonderful broadcasting technology. The Legion Arena fighters existed regionally and in communities. They existed in these little arenas that might be like your local football stadiums or something like this, and has this strong vibe. Like I don't know if anyone's seen county sports in Ireland, or like maybe even the sort of like high school sort of mystique in American sports, where people would cheer on their local challengers, and maybe the local challengers would graduate to go to the big Legion Arena for finals and major events and stuff like this. And this is the era in which Hal made his name. Hal made his name in the era of, less broadcasting, less technology, more community champions and people cheering and hollering on their rough and ready champions in arenas, smaller, more modest arenas, which were just at the end of their street. And then maybe if he created a big show and he'd like won a massive victory, taking him down the pub afterwards and plying him with so much drink that he could barely hit anything except for the floor on his way into the house. So we're creating Flash of Lightning with this very strong rock star persona, but he's also part of a lineage. He's part of a lineage of Legion fighters through the ages, which has, as the Legion Arena has evolved, it's become bigger, it's become more corporate, it's become more international and television-based. He's also got a link back to that earlier Legion Arena, which was much more community-based, which was much more about your tribe and your people. And maybe, Hal is a little bit more of a like rough and ready scramble in the dirt kind of fighter, as opposed to a big flashy lightning and spandex kind of guy. And it would be interesting to see as Flash goes through the challenges that we have planned out for him, how he maybe clashes with that, how he clashes with his grandfather, and maybe how he draws on the experiences and strength of his grandfather to get over maybe some obstacles that are lying in the way.
Well, as I said earlier, I kind of witness your writing and your stories almost at the same time. I get a little bit of a sneak preview ahead of time, but I witness them about the same time as our audience as well. And I can't wait. I can't wait for not only more Flash of Lightning stories, but to hear more about the upbringing of him and his lineage and, his relatives. And, that the idea that everything that you just said came out of that one conversation that I believe it started with me saying I want to draw a kid Flash of Lightning with his father originally on a mountain or something, and just based on that, you came up with all this stuff, which is people in the audience listening. That's exactly how John works. You can't say a damn thing around him because he remembers it and he'll write it into a story. So wonderful writer to have on board yourself, John. So. Thank you very much for being here today, man. Just sit tight for 1 second. I'm just going to do a little preamble, and then we can wrap this thing up. Stay tuned. Next week, episode 4, we're going to be doing a dive into Midjourney AI artwork. And I know it's a very polarizing topic, but we're hoping to demystify some stuff and maybe talk about how this new technology can be used within our own processes of creating artwork, at least for myself. So I'm going to talk about how I'm going about it and how some of the people in the Discord are using the technology as well. So drop by that. It's going to be the same time, Wednesday, 3 p.m. UK, right here. And in the meantime, drop by the STARKADE Discord, discord.gg/STARKADE. Shouts to all the STARKADians that are listening right now. And if you want to get involved, pop over to STARKADE.com. All the relevant links are there. Grab a fighter off the secondary. They're quite affordable. Swing by STARKADE.com, like I just said. Connect your wallet and check out your dashboard, which will be recruiter profiles really, really soon. It'll be new. It'll be fancy. It'll be real, real sweet. Equip your fighter, get them into training, and earn STARKADE credits along the way. If you do all of this, you're going to have a head start before the Legion Arena goes live. That is our online game that we are in the midst of building. We've been in the midst of building it since February, and it's going to be an absolute titan. So I can't wait for that thing to go live. And everybody that's been getting a head start training your fighters and earning credits, they're going to be the ones to beat. You know who you are. I know you're listening right now. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. John, thank you very much for being here and diving into story. It's always fun to talk story with you. And I really appreciate you being here and giving us and myself a few tidbits about what's coming up. The future sounds bright for STARKADE, huh?
Well, I hope so.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, and everybody in everybody here listening in this Twitter Spaces, and everybody that'll be catching the recap on Twitter. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been STARKADE Radio, episode number 3. They haven't shut us down yet. We're still shining bright, and we will see you next week. Same time, same channel. Stay rad, everybody.